Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed look into my creative process. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, and your pal, and I'm excited to have you back for another episode, number 221, as we find ourselves on the Christmas week here. Decided to continue this sort of holiday theme and do something that I really love doing, but with a little bit of a wintry twist, which is a landscape. But I think I want to play with some shaders here and some sort of reflective white materials and create sort of a snowy scene, strong depth of field. Maybe if we get to it, we'll even add sort of floating snowflakes and things like that. So let's get into it. I'm just going to go ahead and set our aspect ratio to a portrait format here. And we are doing a landscape, but I'm actually going to set this to portrait. I'm going to do a vertical composition. And I'll start with just a little plane. Sculpting into that a little bit and setting up our scene here. You can see I do have this sketch, showing some sort of mountains in the background. These are going to be really simple shapes, just made out of cones and landscape primitives, I think. And I'll just have them be really kind of blurred out with a strong depth of field. Kind of build landscape with some nice depth to it. So there's our plane. I'm going to add a landscape real quick to sort of set up our background here. What's up, Nathan? Going. Season's greetings. The other thing that'll be worth setting up is probably just getting a camera in here fairly quickly. Zero that out. If you've followed the channel for a while, you've seen me do plenty of stuff like this, using landscapes to sort of build larger environment, sort of pushing things back and overlapping elements. I love the landscape primitive. Really useful for the types of scenes that I find myself building for. Also find myself really being attracted to things that allow me to have a bit of randomness mixed with, purposeful design choice. I think it adds, digital art can be awfully stiff and lack sort of, I don't know, human hand or roughness, or I don't know. There's something about adding randomness or the way you can generate noise procedurally and have it be outside of your exact control. You can sort of set the parameters, but element of sort of randomness. I think a lot of traditional painters often will kind of muddy the canvas a little bit to get a start, just kind of like roughly brush some stuff on there. I think that's similar, not like a carefully, closely orchestrated series of brush strokes, but sort of a rough, get some stuff on the canvas, have it be a little sloppy and random starting point, which allows you to make other decisions on top of that and add sort of a grain or a texture or a noise behind the tighter layers of painting that you'll be doing on top of it. Yeah, muddy the renders, right? Yeah. The sketch and tune features do that kind of well. Add like rough pencil strokes and stuff like that. I like just using a simple noise texture or other like kind of simple shaders like that. But this is cool too because you've got the seed here. Generate lots of random, nice kind of hill shapes. Increase the scale on some of these. Make some sort of shapes. Also going to add in a tone or two here. Another thing we can do to quickly add some interest here is throw in a sky object, daylight, I guess they call it in Octane. Right, and I think the background sort of mountain range here, I think should have the largest peak point, or the highest point. That's a decent start. I think what we can do, a few segments, ground plane, and make a copy of it. I off null. Excuse me. And let's expand this guy and just sculpt in where the lake's going. Got sculpt tool, pull tool, I guess they call it. I'm holding control now to just have it push down instead of pulling up. What I'll also do, I actually just make a copy of my plane here, drop it down just a little bit. It's going to be the water, a lake. Notice anytime we're working with transparent materials or anything like that, it's really helpful to switch over to path tracing from direct lighting. That's a bit of a better behavior here. Also going to add a protection tag. I always wind up accidentally moving the camera. Another thing I'll do, Shift V, go over to View, turn my opacity up. It's a little annoying. I want to see where the edges of my composition are. Using that sculpt tool to add some sort of foothills here. Plane here. Be getting a bit ahead of myself here, but I'm adding a little bit of noise to the roughness channel. Water texture here. Gives us a little bit of a, it just sort of breaks up the surface, the reflective surface here. It gives it a nice watery effect. All right, anyway. So we'll start adding trees. One of the things I wanted to do is have area in sort of the mid-ground here where not every single tree drawn in exactly, but there's just sort of a mass of foliage. Here. Get it started. And it squish it down. One of the ways I'm going to do that is just by starting off with just a range of barely overlapping sort of cylindrical shapes here, spherical shapes. these. Formula. Just kind of turn that down, adjust this here until we get a nice, gentle, undulating shape. Move it off center here. That's a nice set of foliage here. Add some cylinders underneath. Tree trunks. And I'm not going to match them up one for one. Could add a little trunk for each one of these shapes, but I think it's nicer to sort of place them by eye. Of course, I'm just placing everything sort of randomly now. I'm blocking everything out, getting the basics of my composition going, and then I'm going to go back and start texturing things. So that'll come, but for now, it's really just a clay rendering. Might as well clean this up a little bit. Quality. Call that our background. Copy our wonderful tree group over here. Angle it off a little. Adjust things so they're not so matchy. Add another style of tree. I was playing around with something that I thought was kind of neat. Share it with you guys. It's like in on a 2D treatment. Starts that way. Not sure what sort of tree this is supposed to be. Stylized and cartoony, kind of fun. So try it out. Drawing a loopy, bumpy spline shape here. I'm going to adjust it so that these don't overlap too much because I'm going to wind up extruding the, break the extrusion if it's going to overlap it. Extrude. It's basically make it a little thicker. I'm going to throw in some simple caps. I'm simply just going to rotate this guy. And then I'll move it. I'll just kind of eyeball it so it's roughly centered. For both of these to volume mesher and a volume builder. Thanks, PR. Appreciate it. Cool. It's this kind of shape, which is getting somewhere, but not quite what I want. We can push up the range threshold, which kind of inflates it a little bit. Then I'm going to add a smooth layer. Turn down a bit, but that's again just going to blend things down a little. Maybe even turning up our voxel size, which I actually kind of like. Now that the voxel size is up, these secondary bumps get a little bit small. I'm just going to modify the spline to make those a little bit more prominent. That maybe. Kind of neat. Go ahead, trunk to this as well. I think I want to taper. Get it roughly centered here. Expand, KL to loop cuts. UL to make a loop selection. Let's scale this up. I'm going to turn on soft selection because for whatever reason by default don't connect. Scaling them both up. I don't know why that's the case, but default cinema does not connect ops of cylinders. Irritating. Well, that's of at least R20. I'm still in R20, so maybe that has changed in subsequent generations of products. Why? Oh, and I can't grow the selection, of course, because I'm just going to measure a child of the cylinder trunk. Drop it in here. Ooh, large. Effect. Kind of a neat. Okay. I think it contrasts the other shot. It's not a part of these overall clusters. Maybe it's just done here. One in the foreground. Happy tree. Your world. Get how you want. Happy tree. No, blocking too much of the color. Actually, want that so in the foreground. A few of them in the background there. Hey, Talos, that's an old name. What's going on? I did. Yep, created a Discord. If you donate a small amount monthly, you can get access to that. We've got a little community building in there. Kind of nice. People share work and links to useful stuff. Urge you to check it out. We'll slide our camera imager. Turn that on. I'm just going to bump up our exposure a little bit. Turn our gamut down just a little, get a little bit more contrast. I'd like to, maybe time to start adding some. Let's do that. One of the first textures I'm going to play with is going to be actually mixing texture. Sounds kind of crazy. But this is something I'm really just sort of learning about as well. So start with a glossy material. I'll call this actually tree A. I'm going to make two of these. One of them is just going to be, actually, yeah, white glossy material. That's A. That's going to be our snow. B. Turn the roughness up, the specular down. So this is a less reflective surface. And let's make that green. Kind of a bluish green. There we go. And what's cool is go to materials, create an Octane mix material. Node editor, kind of neat. Here's our Octane mix. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix these two materials using something called a dirt mat, a dirt shader, which is an Octane thing. So we've got our Octane mix here. I'm going to select that. I'm going to drag in tree A, tree B, this node editor. Into material 1 and 2. So that by default, it automatically starts sort of mixing them. Isn't what we want exactly. I'm going to add this to our tree group so we can see what's happening. This is just sort of an even half and half mix. And if we add this dirt mat, put that in the amount, what we can do is use a dirt shader, which is going to calculate the distance between objects and apply different amounts. So into this dirt mat, I'm going to turn the strength up. And you can see here where things are near one another, shows more of our B material. I'm going to turn the radius up, right? This is going to make it look a little bit more like how snow collects on objects. I think what's also happening is it's considering this ground plane considering its ground plane is one of the things that it's going to avoid in terms of placing this white material or snow material. So that actually, maps the white snowy material only to the tops of these objects and to the places where they don't intersect, don't overlap closely, which is cool. That's what we want to do. So there, turning the spread down, you can see exactly what's happening in terms of its distance to the ground. So just the top halves of these are getting this material. So turn the spread up. Distribution, I'm not sure what that slider does, to be honest. Turn that spread up. It's up a little bit more too. Cool. And now we've got a snowy kind of material on the tops of these. I'm just going to go ahead and use this shader for the other trees as well. It does work okay for them. Now if I want to modify either of those, I don't go into this mix, I go into one of the base materials. Sort of a little bit more of a reflective surface on what's supposed to be the snow. A little bit of noise too. You can see what's happening. Foreground tree shapes. Soften that up a little bit. And I guess at this point we should add trunk material. Those I think I'm going to make different between the two types of trees. So I have kind of a paler yellowy brown one. Go redder, darker. Glad I grouped everything and kept it somewhat organized here because now texturing is much easier. Just getting some place. I think we ought to add some texture to the ground here. But first, I'm going to do this roughness noise. Too much for me. Reflective lake surface. So I'm just going to turn that down just so it's a little more subtle. I like getting a lot of reflection on these tree shapes here. Looks cool. now. All right, let's round texture. That with, again, a reflective or a glossy texture here, rather. Add that. I want this mostly to be snowy. I want it to look like some of the grass is sort of through, right? So let's whoops. Add that is here and add sort of a light blue green kind of color. Whoops, that's not what I think. Let's add a noise, dark color of which is going to be green. Blends a little too much, so let's bring high and low clips up. It's fine. 500 for the scale, so we have sort of larger areas. White and green, that moves up a little bit. So too much interaction really with the lake. I'm going to use the same noise material, the ground texture, drive, selection amount, drag and drop that. I think I want to reverse this. You can see the green part is glossy. It looks like the white that's gloss. Swap those colors so that white snowy areas are the glossier. Applying it. Apply this. It is applied. Wrong material selected. Sorry about that. All right, so let's undo. Let's go to this material, which is round because now this material goes to panel, put it over here. For roughness. Now this is what I was after before. You could see, I've got it reversed, but you see how with the roughness, you're only getting nice reflections in one area. Switch the white and black values, you'll see that only our snow now. That's that. Areas of white. It creates a more realistic snowy effects. And now it sort of looks like we've got snowy patches, the reflection, and some sort of grassy patch. Add a bump to all of it. I think that will just add a little bit of, roughness to the whole floor. Roughness coming together. I think that's a little too rough because I'm not sort of killing some of the reflections that I'm going to turn down. Actually, the way to do that is really just to make these two colors closer in value to one another. There isn't like a height like there is in the C4D bump channel. That's all right. Now what I'm going to do, add sort of a background material here for our mountains. Not going to add any glossiness to that. I think I might try to make it snowy. But these are going to be blurred out by our strong depth of field that we're going to add in a bit. So I'm not going to worry about actual reflections. I'm going to start with just a gradient. Let's go from this sort of greenish color. I guess white in the background. Add some purple to that as well. Now we're getting sort of a gradation up. Alter the angle a little bit here. That gradient be applied unevenly, which allows us to get a little bit more variation in the spot on the gradient it hits for each of these hills. That makes sense. Might not. As I have it set to flat, so sort of as I rotate this, it's going to affect different parts of the mountain. I'm just sort of adjusting, tweaking bit by bit here until I get sort of a happy medium of a gradation. The other thing, of course, you could do is hop in here and push the white up a little further, add a little more bottom. see how it's actually going to look. Whoops. What happened there? Let's go over to our thin lens, depth of field, turn off autofocus. Let's crank that aperture. Choose sort of a focal point here. Hey Ben, just noticing your comment now. Thanks for tuning in. See if we can add a bit of snowiness. Weirdly, when we clicked it over into layer, our mapping got a bit weird. So I'm going to add a noise shader in here. Set that to screen. So we've just got these white blobs being flipping. Scale. And now we've just got snowy patches here. Come down a little. it seem like a little bit more of a scene. Okay, what else? I think another thing that might help this look more like a snowy scene, scatter and actually add little lumps of snow around the scenes. Let's try that. Sphere. Oh, you know what? I can do faster. Hemisphere. And I'll expand it. Down a little. Our snow lump. Scatter. Throw this plane right into the scatter, and you see, boom, a ton of them. Put it to surface. Let's link our scale to the distribution. See, when I had this set to 0, we're seeing the underside of some of these. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the position. I'm just going to turn it down and maybe -2. So that way, you know that the bottom of our geometry here is going to be intersecting the plane. So it won't look like it's floating. Another thing you can see, we're getting snow in the middle of our lake here. So we need to push that down a little bit further. Let's get this stuff in. Tree A material, which is really basically just snow. Add that to our sphere here. That's sort of a snowy texture from that guy. It's cool. Turn the clones up to say 3000. And then throw noise shader on. I'm going to just select basically my lighting and the ground plane and the scatter. Just kind of isolate. See what we're dealing with. So. Just bump up. That's going to just flip out the smallest of the bumps. Cool. I'm going to adjust this global scale to 200. Okay. Start. Let's turn our scene back on. Mess with this a little bit more. 5,000. Let's just change the seed here until we've got sort of a distribution of snowy bumps that we like. Definitely want a lot in the foreground here. I like to avoid too many inside the lake. That's looking good. I think this is actually pretty decent distribution. Live with that. Okay. All right. Kind of a snowy tone to it. Another thing we can add to further push this kind of hazy look is fog volume. Bring that voxel size up to 50, so it runs a lot quicker. I'm not going to fill the whole scene with it. Get a little bit heavy in terms of processor requirements. You see as I'm above here and I'm making sure it goes to the edge of our camera. You know what? Let's keep our sort of foreground clear of fog. Back we go. Okay. Further back into the foothills of these mountains. Now I could have the fog go all the way back into these mountains, but by the time we get this distance away from the camera, we're gonna have such a density, it's gonna feel okay. You'll see. All right, so there's our volume. To the edge. Slider. Let's also add a noise texture. This is going to sort of break things up as I usually do. That element of randomness that I've talked about. Let's turn scale way up and adjust our clipping so it's higher contrast. And obviously that color and density is all wrong, so let's bring the density. You can also go to absorption and scattering and make this kind of a light blue color. Because it's so deep, the density needs to be actually quite low. Imagine, even if it's, the density refers to obviously how many voxels they are, how dense the volume is. Imagine that since it's so long, even if they're quite opaque, quite translucent, I should say, there's so many of them stacked along this long depth here that towards the end of it, where it's thickest, you really do get quite a dense look. So less than 1% density. Looks like we only need to be like 0.1% really to start getting a little bit of softness. I don't want to kill all the detail we've built in the background here, so it's about finding that happy medium. Bit more blue. I've got some sort of overall softness. Cool. What else? I think the last little bits of detail we can do is sort of snowfall. See if we can do that. Let's do that very simply. Sphere. Small one. Call it 1 maybe. character. Have to even see clones. No, that's probably too much. Let's go 12 by 12. This is what I wanted. You can see it's showing up here that some of them are going to be kind of sharp, and some of them are almost going to be like bokeh dots, really soft. It's that sort of snowy. Also, I think we should texture them. Let's use specular. Roughness up. Turn. We had universal material. There's our emission. So turn most of this off. Actually. All right, a little too bright, I think. Well, that's because our bloom is set way, way high too. There's some of our snowfall. A little smaller on this sphere. A few more clones. Right, we're getting somewhere. in there. Get close. I like the little reflections. More light to the scene. Let's actually go over here. What will help is if we take this ground color, kind of a richer, going to get our shadows and sort of the things on the low end of the geometry. A little bit more blue in there. The sky a little bit richer. Nice. Raise it. Make the sun even more saturated. Oh, and I think this sort of reflective material that's picking up the sky color really helps this feel a lot more like snow. It's cool. I'll add just a little bit more. All right. All right, I think I'm happy with how this looks. I'm gonna turn up my settings just a little bit. Start my final render. Cool. It's not showing up there. Ah, it's because render perfect's turn. Octane, not like render perfect. There we go. Great. A little on the fly troubleshooting as we're finishing up here. Awesome. Thanks a lot for tuning in, everyone. I think this image is simple, but has sort of a texture and a fuzziness and a sort of a charm that I think feels at home with the idea of like a winter wonderland or that snowy holiday scene. So it's kind of fun to put together. I love being able to get this sort of atmospheric feel and this little bit of noisy kind of softness to an image like this. I think that helps break up your sort of typical CG look. Hope you found this useful. If you did, please please hit subscribe and hit that thumbs up like button. It really helps us out a lot in the YouTube algorithm. I've noticed actually that a lot of people who view these videos don't actually follow. So if you like these, if you tune in somewhat regularly, please hit that subscribe button. That'll help the channel out a lot. If you want to keep up with me and the work that I'm doing, hit me up at DLGNCE on Instagram and the other social medias. The website is diligence.studio. And until next week, this is Stuart saying thanks a lot for tuning in. I appreciate all of you. Let me know if you have any further questions. Drop one in the comments below, and I will see you next week.